Okay, good evening. We're ready to get started. Tonight we're going to be learning officially Daf Nun Zayin, but of course Nun Vav Amud Beis. We are currently on the bottom of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, about 2/3 of the way down. If you see the two dots there, 2/3 of the way down, it starts out with Tanu Rabbanan Shisha Dvarim Asu Anshe Yericho. That should ring a bell, because when we learned the Mishnah at the top of this Amud, at the bottom of the previous Amud, it spoke about this as well. However, this is a Tosefta. And it's very, very important when learning a Mishnah to match all the correlating Toseftaos and Brisos to make sure that we understand the full gamut of how the Tanoim understood this particular sugya. So if you were to compare side by side the Tosefta we're about to learn with the Mishnah that we learned over Shabbos, you will see that there will be some slight differentiators. And as well, we're going to be making a change even within this Tosefta. Let us get started 2/3 of the way down in Vav Amud Aleph. Here we go. It says the Tosefta as follows, Tanu Rabbanan. Shisha dvarim asu anshe Yericho. There were 6 things that the people of Yericho did. Shlosha birtzon chachamim, shlosha shelo birtzon chachamim. 3 of them were within the desires, within the what the chachamim wanted, and 3 of them were not. The elu biratzon chachamim. These things were considered acceptable to the chachamim. What were those 3 things? Markivin dekalim kol hayom. You were able to graft certain types of trees. We saw a couple of shitas yesterday on Shabbos as to what that meant. They made this brew that they injected into the tree, or it was male-female trees that they were grafting. The korchanes shema, we saw this at a couple of different pshatim. Did it mean to stop and say Baruch Shem, to stop and not say Baruch Shem, to say Hayom Alav Avecha as one chunk, a bunch of shitas we saw. The kotzer and lifnei ha'omer, and to cut the harvest before the hakrava of the korban on the 16th of Nisan. Those were the 3 things that were beratzon chachamim. Be'elu shelo beratzon chachamim. The following 3 things were not beratzon chachamim. What were those 3 things? Says the Gemara, we are about 3/4 of the way down on Vav Amud Aleph. Godshin lifnei ha'omer. Godshin, to make a gadish, to make a pile of the grains before the omer was brought. Uportzin pratos beganosehim uvepartisosehim. They would make openings in their fields and in their orchards. Laha'achil nashar la'anim, to have all the fallen fruits be available to poor people. B'shnei v'tzoris, during difficult years. B'shabbasos v'yamim tovim, and on Shabbos and Yom Tov, they'd make holes in their walls to allow people to access their food. Umatir and gamzios shel hektish, and they would also allow for the branches of hektish to be eaten. This we discussed yesterday as well. Shel charuv shel shikma, of a carob tree and of a shikma, of a sycamore tree. Divrei Reb Meir. All of that is a sheet of Reb Meir, 3 in, 3 out. That's how Reb Meir is quoted in this Tosefta. 10 lines from the bottom or so, and Vav Amud Aleph says the Gemara, still in the Tosefta. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says something's got to be wrong with what you just said. Im beratzon chachamim hayu osin. If the first 3 things that you said were really beratzon chachamim, Yehu kol adam osin kain. Everyone would do that all year round. It should have been not just that they tolerated it. It sounds like it's totally mutter. It wasn't anything more than that. Al shlosha michu biyadam. All 6 of them were shelo beratzon chachamim. They didn't want you to do any of them. On 3 of them, they made us think about it. Al shlosha michu biyadam, al shlosha lo michu biyadam. And that is how he analyzes the 3 things that they did. That was shelo beratzon chachamim and beratzon chachamim. It wasn't really beratzon chachamim. It was not allowed. It wasn't great, but the chachamim had to pick their battles. So in 3 cases, they decided to pick a battle, and in 3 cases, they decided not to. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda differs from the way that Reb Meir is written up in the Tosefta. But still more, Rabbi Yehuda makes changes to what 3 go where. How so? 6, 7 lines from the bottom of Vav Amud Aleph. Ve'elu shelo michu biyadam. What were the 3 that the chachamim did not make a macha about, that they did not rebel against, they didn't push against the Anshe Yericho? They said, Markivin dekalim kol hayom, it's not great, but I'm not going to make us think about it. V'korchanes shema, not great, but again, we're not going to put up a fight. The kotzrin v'gochin, here he merges languages together. This is not how Reb Meir portrayed himself in the beginning of the Tosefta, a few lines above. They cut and they compiled. We will see shortly that the word v'kotzrin may not belong here. Lifnei ha'omer, before the korban homer was brought on Tes Zayin of Nisan. Rabbi Yehuda continues it within his version of the 3 and 3 of Yericho. Ve'elu shemichu biyadam, the following the chachamim, it wasn't only shelo b'ritzonim, but they were really opposed to. So what were the 3 that they were opposed to, that they really did make a macha about? Matir and gamzios shel hektish shel charv shel shikma. When it came to the branches of things that were hektish, again, the tree was what was initially given as hektish. The branches only grew at a later time. So they were matir, the Anshe Yericho were matir, the branches of the charuv, of the carob tree, and of the shikma, of the sycamore. That was number one that they made a macha about. Number two, ports and protos beganoseim upardesehen. They also made a macha about people having access to their fields and to their gardens. Lahachil nesha, the fruits that had fallen. La'anim b'shabbasos b'shnei b'tzoros. Again, slightly different languages, just a little bit out of order. The b'shnei b'tzoros was before Shabbos v'yom tov before. So a little different. And lastly, v'nosin and peil yerek, and they would give over vegetables to be available for peah. That's very strange. We'll see later why, when it comes to the world of peah, that we know that vegetables were not really shaykh. It had to be something that could be mekuyam, something that you could put in a grain house, something that could be stored at length. I can tell you from having had a red pepper sit in my fridge for 1 week too long, it doesn't look so geschmack after a week and a half. So that's not considered peah. Peah is only something that is considered to have kiyum, and we'll see the marmakomos for that later. So this, they made a macha against this too. So then the Tosefta is over. So the last 10 lines have been Tosefta, or 3 lines from the bottom. Asks the Gemara, wait a minute. In Rabbi Yehuda's repetition of what he thought this Tosefta should be, he said that the word kotzer was shelo b'lashon chachamim. Asks the Gemara, v'sava Rabbi Yehuda ktsira shelo b'ratzon chachamim. He says that that's not part of the ratzon chachamim to do the ktsira, to cut the harvest before Tes Zayin Nisan, before the Hakrava of the Omer. How can that be? V'hatanan anshe richo kotzerin lifnei haOmer, and look at the language, biratzon chachamim. Doesn't get more explicit than that. That seems very, very clear. How can Rabbi Yehuda say that it wasn't biratzon chachamim? Harei, the Mishnah here says explicitly that it was biratzon chachamim. The godshin v'lifnei Omer shelo biratzon chachamim v'lo michu biyadam chachamim. Both of them are not geschmack, but we see that it's baratzon chachamim, the gochen, to make a pile, that was shelo baratzon chachamim, and they were not michu biyadam in both of these cases. But the point is that none of them are great. So how it doesn't seem to be that it's usher. So why is it that in the Tosefta, Rabbi Yehuda seems to paint a picture that the kotzerin was one halachic form, and the ktsira in the Mishnah doesn't seem to be a problem at all. So it says the Gemara, as we turn to the top of Nun Vavam Med Beis, Man Shamas, to finish off our question, Nun Vavam Med Beis, top line, Man Shamas Leida Amar Michu V'lo Michu, who is the one who restructured our Mishnah to say that all of them are usher? And it's just a question of whether or not the Chachamim went against the Anshe Richo to say, this is not okay. We're going to make a macha, right or wrong, we're going to make a macha. So that was Rabbi Yehuda, Viktani, and what do we see? Kotzer, Biratzon Chachamim. So there's just a stira within the world of Rabbi Yehuda. How do we answer this question? Says the Gemara, according to the way you're explaining Rabbi Yehuda, we would then need to shift the balance. Remember, we said that 3 of them lo michu biyadam and 3 of them are michu biyadam. But if you're changing the way that Rabbi Yehuda looks at ktsira, then ulatameh hani arba hava. Then it would put the ktsira into the category. It would be 4 against 2. 4 that there was no macha, and 2 that there is a macha, and that's not how the Tosefta is framed. And therefore, says the Gemara, ela sami mikan ktsira, same in Aramaic means to erase. You have to erase the word ktsira. In Rabbi Yehuda's version of the Tosefta, on the bottom of Nun Vavam Aleph, he adds the word v'kotzer and v'gochin, 6 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, that's a mistake in the Tosefta. Get out the scalpel, scratch it out. The word v'kotzer was not in the Tosefta, even within Rabbi Yehuda, and that solves our problem because the whole question falls away. There used to be a question, now there's no question anymore. The word v'kotzer should not appear at all. That brings us to the 2 dots on Nun Vavam Med Beis. Let's continue. We spoke about in this Tosefta, matir and gamzil shel hektish shel charav shel shikma. We said that the branches of a tree, that would be a carob tree and a shikma tree, a sycamore tree, we said that they were matir. Those things, Amru Rabu Seinu, lo hikdishu elakoros. They said all that we really were makdish to the mikdash of these trees, of the charav and the shikma, was the trunk of the tree, the main part of the tree. But the branches, no, the branches are aftergrowth. That's not what we were makdish, our avoseinu. Their forefathers, when they planted the tree, they were only makdish the trunks of the tree, not the growth of the tree. So we're good to go. And what's the machlokes between the chachamim and the Anshe Yericho? The machlokes is about the growth that happens after the dedication. One shita holds that there's no problem, there's no me'ila with the growth that happens after the fact. Me'ila is when you use something that belongs to hektish inappropriately. But here, says the Gemara, there is no iser me'ila. This is the Anshe Yericho. Why are we allowed to use the branches of the carob tree and of the sycamore tree? Because it's the growth beyond the hektish. It's not the hektish itself. The trunk of the tree was the hektish. I'm asking, you take the bark off, that's for sure problematic. But the branches, that's after the fact. There's no me'ila b'gidulan. However, I agree with you, say the Chachamim. I agree with you. I'm maskim that there's no Isser of Me'ila on the branches, and they agree be'etzem that the din of being makdish the tree applies to whatever exists on the tree that day, but none of the growth. However, Isura Miha'ika, there still is an Isser that applies here that you are not allowed to utilize, and they're therefore uncomfortable with the usage of the tree. And that's the machlokas that's happening in the Tosefta on the bottom of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, and really technically in our Mishnah on the bottom and top of Nun Hey Amud Beis Nun Vav Amud Aleph, when the Mishnah first presents it, is whether or not we say that there's an Isser by the aftergrowth of the branches after the hektish. And that's how the Gemara deals with the machlokas between the Anshe Yericho and the Chachamim who are Michu B'Yadam. What about Uports and Pirtzos? Amar Ula, two different approaches here. Here's approach number one. Approach number one, we're a quarter of the way down Nun Vav Amud Aleph. What does it mean? Uports and Pirtzos, they used to make breaks in the fence in order to allow poor people to access some of the food that might be left over. Amar Ula, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Machlokes, B'Shel Machbedos. The only Machlokes is when you're talking about, let's say, dates from a tree, Machbedos are the higher branches of the tree. That's where there's a Machlokes. The Ravana and Savre, the rabbis who pushed against the Anshe Yericho, goes, Rinan Shema Yalav Yitlosh. He'll grab a rope and he'll bring himself up the tree. He'll climb the tree. That's an Isser D'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to climb a tree on Shabbos. Trees are inherently muksa. We've seen a number of times already. Come on. People are not climbing a tree. That's not happening. That's not happening. They were not concerned about that. Aval b'shel ben akip and divrei akol muter. Everyone would. The only machlokas was the higher level, but everyone would agree that the branches in the lower level, everyone would agree that that's muter for them to use, no problem at all. But that was our conversation of Uports and Pirtzos. What were they upset about? What do you go feed the poor people? What are you concerned about? Let them take food. So the machlokas was whether or not we were concerned that they were going to climb the tree. Amar le Rava, but wait a minute. Forget about all of this. The hom muksos ninhu. We know that there's a din called Nolad. The first Mishnah in Maseches Beitza is that if there's Peiros Hanoshrin, if you have fruits that are attached to a tree before Shabbos begins, or I should say during Bein Hashmashos, so then we know that anything that's inaccessible to you during Bein Hashmashos, the halacha is that Migud is Katzoy the Bein Hashmashos, because it's inaccessible to you during Bein Hashmashos, is Katzoy l'kol yom kula, and therefore you're not allowed to benefit from that at all. It's all muksa to you. So what are you talking about? Letting people come and Shabbasim v'yamim tovim. That was the explicit language of the Tosefta. Twice over by Reb Yehuda and by Reb Meir. We use the language of Shabbos and Yontif. That should be Nola. That should be Muksa. So says the Gemara, Amar le Rabba. It's not really Rabba. It's actually Rabba, because if it's Amar le, he says to him it can't be Rabba. Rabba was 4th century. Reish Lakish was very early Amora. So they make it Rabba in the side, which was a 3rd century Amora, which puts them approximately 25 years closer. That's why you'll see a lot of Rava corrections in Shas. You'll see a lot of them because the history doesn't always click. So here, this is one of those samples where you have someone who's 50, 60, 70 years apart. This is the change. It's a significant change. So it really should be Amar le Rabba. These should be muksa. The fruits, the dates that are attached to the tree should be muksa. The chitema. And if you want to say, no, hold the chazi orvin. Let's say a person is raising birds, and Meforshim point out this isn't stam ravens, birds that are flying overhead. These are birds that are domesticated. The ones, we conceptually, it's the bird that you keep in your house in a cage, right? A parrot. So this bird was a little bit more tenacious. Who keeps an orev in their house? Okay, that's what they did. But what was his feed? What was the accessible? So during Bein Hashmashos, that food was perfectly fine for the bird, and therefore it's not muksa. So says the Gemara, maybe we can say the chitema hold the chazi orban. Says the Gemara, well that's not such a good argument, because hashta muchan la'adam lo have muchan la'klavim. Hashta muchan la'adam, the fact that it's muchan la'adam lo have muchan la'klavim doesn't make it fit for animals. It wasn't fit for me at the time. It's not fit for the dogs. It's not fit for the raven. How do we know that that's true about the dogs? It's not. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im lo haisa nevela erev Shabbos. If the meat was not nevela before Shabbos, so then asura lefi she'ena mina muchan. It's going to be asur because it's not edible at all for the dogs. They can't eat it whatsoever. Muchan la'orvim havim muchan la'adam. And now you're going to go say, we just saw by dogs you're not allowed to utilize them as your precedent for what's allowed and not allowed during Bein Hashmashos. So muchan la'orvim havim muchan la'adam. You're going to say that just because you have your domesticated bird that's allowed to eat that food because it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan during Bein Hashmashos, so we're matir on the lenient side during Bein Hashmashos. But that's ridiculous. But we just saw by the dog it's not allowed. Answers the Gemara, Taka, that's not correct. Amar le'in. We do rely on that to say that maybe our case is really speaking about where birds are domesticated and therefore the dates are edible for those people, and maybe that's our case. Amar le'in, yes, absolutely. Muchan la'adam lo havim muchan la'klavim. Why is it that when something is edible for a person, we don't allow them to give to their dog on Shabbos because the cholmidi, the chazilini shel maksal midati. He wants it. It's for him. He's not thinking of anything else. Muchan lo'orvim having muchan lo'adam. And if a person has an orev, they have a bird for whom the food is edible. That's muchan adam cholmidi the chazilini shtati loy. Yeah. Absolutely, it's edible for the bird and edible for me. The nevela is not edible for me, so that we learn from the orev. We don't learn from the dog. Anyways, that's approach number one, is to say that the machlokes about uports and pratzos between the Anshe Yericho and the Chachamim is whether or not there's an Isser D'Rabbanan if they're going to climb the tree to get the dates from the high branches of the tree. However, approach number two, which is where we're starting with now, Ki Asa Rabin, is the exact opposite machlokes. Ki Asa Rabin, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish machlokes b'shel ben kibbut. No, the only machlokes is by the lower branches. The Rabbanan Sarei Muchan Lo'orvim Lo Havim Muchan Lo'adam. Anshe Yericho Sarei Muchan Lo'orvim Havim Muchan Lo'adam. This was exactly our machlokes. They said it's just a question of whether or not there is a status of muksa from before Shabbos for those who say that we can rely on the birds to establish the food is available. So then no problem. That's the Anshe Yericho, but the Chachamim didn't hold that way. Aval b'shel nachbedos, but on the higher branches, everyone agrees. Divrei Akol Aser, everyone agrees. So two different approaches as to how we understand what the concern was, what the scope of the machlokas was between the Anshe Yericho and the Chachamim. That brings us to the two dots, 3/4, maybe 4/5 of the way down on Daf Yomi Beis. Let's continue. We said in the Tosefta that one of the things that took place was and the Chachamim were michu biyadam. Why did the Chachamim push back on there? Let the poor people have some food. Let the poor people have some food. It's pay. Okay, so it's not really paya. Big deal. Let them go get some vegetables. Pick up cucumber. No problem. So says the Gemara. Let's get into this and figure out what's going on. Come on, this is a basic Mishnah Maseches Peah. The Mishnah Maseches Peah gives very clear parameters about what Peah is and what Peah isn't. And if, in fact, something isn't Peah, it's Chayav and Meiser. So you're just going to give it away to someone. You have to make sure to do your math right. If you have 10 pieces and really it's not Peah, and you give away 2 pieces, you still need to give your Meiser off of the whole, not on the -2. So that's what the Gemara is concerned about, is that the Mishnah writes that it's not a klal amru b'peah, kol shehu ochel, it has to be a food, v'nishmar, it has to be, we'll see what that means, v'gidul mina ha'aretz, has to grow from the ground, l'kitaso ka'achas, u'machniso l'kiyum chai b'peah. There's 5 conditions to make something into peah. Let's analyze each one. Kol shehu ochel, what do we mean by the food itself? Not the aftergrowth, not the little branches that grow after the grain. The grains themselves, not the aftergrowth stuff. All that, the chaff, forget about all of that. That's not part of peah. The nishmar prat lehefker. The nishmar means that it's yours. It doesn't belong to hefker. There's a bilus here. Somebody actually owns it. That's parameter number 2. Parameter number 3, u'gdulimina aretz, has to grow from the ground. Prat lechemehenu pitrios, to exclude fungi and to exclude mushrooms, things that grow without the ground. We've seen mushrooms grow in the funniest of places. So that's not shaykh and peah. Even if all 5 have to apply at the same time. Next, l'kitaso ke'achas prat l'te'enim. Te'enim, even within one tree, there's not one day to harvest. Each bunch grows at a different rate. So that also can't be part of peah. And now here's where we come in. We said in our Tosefta that you're going to use a vegetable for peah. You're going to give it to the poor people. What's the last parameter? Umachniso l'kiyum prat l'yerek. No, yerek is not shaykh by peah. A yerek of vegetable is not shaykh by peah. It's because it cannot be put into a granary. It can't be stored. It spoils after just a few days. It doesn't have a long shelf life. We have genetically modified foods and they only last for so long. They for sure didn't. So then all alachas kama v'kama. But then how can the Tosefta say that the Anshe Yericho were giving out yerek vegetation? That's crazy. That's not peah. And if it's not peah, you're chayiv and meiser. And if it's your chayiv and meiser, how are you giving it away? There's a lot of halachic. I understand you're feeding the poor, but we have a pecking order of halachic responsibility. You're not allowed to not pay meiser. The meiser has to go to the right place at the right time. This is not peah. And if it's not peah, then you're chayiv and meiser. It says the Gemara, what's going on here? Amar Rav Yehuda, you're absolutely right. Amar Rav, what are we talking about? Hacha beroshe liftos skinan. We're talking about the leaves on top of a turnip. It's the leaves, but the leaves actually might withstand growth they might be able to stay in the warehouse provided they're still connected to the stalk of the turnip. That's possible. So that's what we're talking. If the leaves are connected to the turnip would be good peah. But the leaves that are connected to the turnip, is that considered to be a violation of the rules of yerek? Yes or no? So it says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom. Mar savar machniso l'kiyum davar acher shmekim. that even though you're right, the leaves wouldn't last on their own, but because they're connected to the turnip, and the turnip is totally fine peah, therefore good to go, no problem at all. That's still considered kiyum, and therefore it's considered peah, and that's what the Anshe Yericho we're talking about. We're talking about the leaves that were on top of the turnip. Masha'enkin, the Chachamim said, Umar Savar, lo shmekim. No, absolutely not. The only reason why those leaves are staying alive is because of the turnip. The turnip is peah, but the leaves are vegetation. You're chayv meiser in that, and that you can't give away to poor people. That was the machlokas between the Anshe Yericho and the Chachamim. 2 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanon, Birishona hayunosnen peah lelefes ulekruv. We're going to see a whole number of shitas in the Tanaim here, and then let's see if we can consolidate a couple of them. So this Brisa says as follows: Birishona, it's not everybody. It was Goris, the word Birishona. It should have just said nothing, actually, according to many. It should just say nosnen peah, hayu nosnen peah lelefes for the kruv, that you would give peah of lefes, of turnips, to the kruv, and of cabbage. Rabbi Yossi Omer af lekaflut, even of leek, even of the vegetable that we use nowadays. We have them in our stores. I presume it's the same one. The Tanya Idach, another Brisa, is similar, but not identical. Hayunosnen peah lelefes for lekaflut. It's a little different, that you would be able to use turnip and leek. Reb Shimon Omer af lekruv, and it would even include cabbage. So all the same 3 things, but just kind of mixed up a little bit. Let's continue. Top of Nun Zayin Badalf. Neima Tlasa Tanoi Havu. Seems to be that there's at least 3 shitas here. If you look back, there's the first one that said lefes and kruv. That's a lefes and kruv. There's Rabbi Yossi that says even kaflut. There is pay of a lefes of a kaflut, and then Rav Shimon seems to be the same as a previous shita. So it says the Gemara, Neima Tlasa Tanoi Havu. Seems like there's really 3 shitas here. Answers the Gemara, there are not 3 shitas. Lo, Trey Tanoi Havu. The Tanakama de Reb Shimon Hainu Reb Yossi, the Tanakama de Reb Yossi Hainu Reb Shimon. Really, there's no difference between the 2 Tanakamas of both of the Brises. They're identical. They don't say the same things. Well, they actually do, because when there's the additional shita, it says Rav so-and-so said af X, it makes it so that the Tanakama holds that all 3 are going to be aser. Lo, Trey Tanoi Havu, the Tanakama de Reb Shimon Hainu Reb Yossi, the Tanakama de Reb Yossi Hainu Reb Shimon. My af. What did each of the Tanaim mean when they were saying af? They were adding, they were adding to the Reisha. So that's therefore the Tanakama in both cases was the same, who would say that both lefes, kruv, and kaflut, that both turnip, cabbage, and leek were all considered to be problematic. Those 2 were the same, and then the other 2 shitas were Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. Okay, perfect. So that's how it would work out. That's just a couple of shitas instead of a lot of shitas. Tana Rabbanan, a couple of stories the Gemara tells. Ben Bohayan Nasan Peah LeYerek. There was a person who gave out vegetables, real vegetables, bona fide vegetables. They were really not shaykh and peah, and he gave them out to poor people. He saw people were walking out of the fields with vegetables. That scene is not a scene. People should not be taking vegetables from your garden. That's not, even if you want to give it to them, that's fine. You just got to make sure you give meiser. They were standing by the gate of the garden. Amar Lahem, the father of, actually, I guess his name was Bohayan. Bohayan was standing there. Amar Lahem, he said, Banai, my children, hashlichu me'alechem v'aninosem lachem kiflayim b'me'usar. Let me give you a double, but at least let me give it tithe. Don't take this, put it down. I'll double your income. Please just put this down so we can treat it halachically appropriately to give it meiser. Lo mipnei she'eni tzaras, not because I'm cheap, but because you're not allowed to give vegetables. Vegetables are not part of payah, and if vegetables are not part of payah, then you're not supposed to be giving it out because you have to give meiser on it. So just drop everything right here. I promise I'll double your reward. So the Gemara says, Lama le lemeimra lehu. Why did he, Bohayan, say to them, to the poor people, Lo mipnei she'eni tzara? Why did he start talking about it? It's not because I'm cheap. What was the whole concern there? So says the Gemara, Ki hechi delo lemru dachuye kamatchil, and he was just pushing them off and just drop it and leave it. He wasn't trying to be cheap. He was being authentic with them. I really want to give you. I'll give you double. I'll give you more. I'm happy to give more than I would normally have given had it been actual payah. But I'm not comfortable giving you things that were not me'usar that require meiser. This isn't payah. It's a vegetable. Vegetables are not shaykh and payah. Tana Rabbanan. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, there were a lot of skins of the animal that were worth a lot of money, and not all of them were burned up on the Mizbech. Tana Rabbanan b'Rishona ha'yimanichin oros kachim b'lishkas Beis HaParva. We learned in Maseches Tami, there's a map, and if you look in the art scroll, beautiful map, and another Sfarim as well, in the back of the Mesivta, also a beautiful map. So there was a room called the Beis HaParva. It was a room in the Mikdash, and that's where they kept all the skins of the animal. Erev, every night, all the Kohanim would come and take whatever was shaykh to them. All the Kohanim that were working in that mishmar, they would come and they would take the skins. The problem was some Kohanim were bigger than others. So the bigger guy got more skins out of the deal. You just pushed everyone out of the way. No, you got like a Kohen who's 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. You've got a Kohen who's 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. The bigger guy is going to get more. So Iskinu, they said it was a little bit of an unfair system. Iskinu shu machalkin osan me'erev Shabbos, only on Fridays. We're not giving it out every day. We're not having a fight every week, and hopefully that'll be a little bit more equitable. Well, the Gemara says it was not more equitable. The Asyan Kul Mishmaros B'Shakman V'Adadis. Sorry, this was the last part of the beginning. So that it was given on Me'erev Shabbos that everyone would come at the same time and everyone would take an equal amount. Then says the Gemara, V'Adayin Hayu Gedolei Kahuna Nodlin Osan B'Zroa. There were still, the bigger Kohanim were still taking things with strength. They were taking what was there. So then, Amdu Bailim V'Hikdishim L'Shamayim. No one gets it. No one gets it. It's unfair. It's not fair because the skins were worth a lot of money. So what they basically ended up doing is saying, because you Kohanim are not sharing nicely, so forget it. We're just going to close it off to everyone. No one gets the skins anymore. Amru lo hayu yamim mu'atim. It wasn't even a long time. Ad shechipu es ahechal kulo betavlos shel zahav. They made so much money from the skins that they were able to cover the hechal in tavlos, in squares of zahav. Shein ama al ama. 1 amma by 1 amma, that's 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot approximately. Ke'ove dinar zav, and it had a thickness of a particular coin. That's a lot of solid gold. That's a lot of gold. Well, the regel, and when it came time for aliyah the regel, they would display it in a way. Manichan osan al gav maila b'harabais. They put it on the slope of harabais. And they would lay out the gold in a way where people would say, "Oh my gosh, this is stunning." That there's no dofi. Rashi writes that there's no errors. This gold is gorgeous. Beautiful story. What a vision to see. Imagine walking up to Harabais, seeing just a gorgeous sight, all because of the skins of the korbanos. Unbelievable scene. Tana Abba Shol Omer. Let's continue. Another story. Koros shel shikma hayu be'ericho. There were some pieces of wood of sycamore that were in Yericho. V'hayu ba'alei zros nodlen osan bezro. People would take them. Amdu ba'alim v'kdishu l'shamayim. Similar story. The strong guys were taking away from the little guys, so they were makdish them, so no one would take them. Aleihem, on those people who were not so nice. Ve'al kayotze bahem, and on people who were like them. Amar Abba Shal ben Batnis mishum Abba Yosef ben Chanin. Oy li mi beis baitus, oy li me alasan. The people of beis baitus were terrible, and so was their stick. Ma'alasan, different versions of what Ma'alasan means in the Rishonim. Oy li mi beis chanin, oy li mi lichishasan, and the people of beis chanin, terrible were they because they were lichisha. They would whisper, they would say things about people, b'lashon hara, those kinds of isurei b'peh. Oy li mi beis katrus, oy li mi kulmasin, because of their pen, of their kulmus, their quill, they would write things that were not nice. Oy li mi beis Yishmael ben Pachi, oy li me agrofan. And also Yishmael ben Pachi, that we'll see later that this is only talking about the people who were around him, but not him himself. These are not referencing him, Yishmael ben Pachi himself. Shehem kohanim gedolim. All of these people were kohanim gedolim. Ubenehen gizbarim. Their children were the ones who were in charge of the gizbar. They were the ones in charge of doling out cash. V'chasneim, their sons-in-law amrakalim, the people who were in charge. V'avdein chovten es ha'am. The maklos people, they were beating people up. That was a crazy culture. The power got to the head. Not to all of them, as we will soon see, but it wasn't a geschmack environment with every Kohen Gadol. It's not good. So the Gemara says, oily in all 4 of these cases. Tan Rabbanan, the rabbi said there were 4 times, in fact, tzavchos, tzavcha, zara, that there were 4, the discussion in the Meforshim here, what this means. The Azara screamed out. There was a baskol that could have been heard in the Azara, or was it all just to teach homiletically that something bad was going on and something good was going on? We'll see a couple good things and a couple of bad things. Let's see. First and foremost, Rishona, second wide line, Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, for most of the way down the page. Rishona, Tzuumi Kan B'nei Eli Shetimu Heichal Hashem. The children of Eli, Chafni and Pinchas, they were Timu Heichal Hashem. What did they do? So if you look in Rashi, Rashi says 3 lines from the bottom, Asher Yishkavun Es Hanashim, that they were intimate with women by the Heichal Hashem. The Meforshim say that's not pshat, that's not what happened. What was happening was, it wasn't Tashmish Amita, but that they were getting a little lackadaisical in regards to bringing the korbanos. So a woman who would have had the opportunity to be with her spouse to fulfill the mitzvah of ona, maybe the mitzvah of purvu, fine, but they were slow, and then the women came home late, and the din fell on Chafni and Pinchas, who weren't working as efficiently as they could have. So it's not pshat in the pasuk. The Meforshim pick up on Rashi. Why does Rashi say that he slept with these women? That's seemingly not exactly correct. He's quoting the pasuk, granted, but why isn't Rashi? So some of the Rishonim are bothered by that, but nevertheless, that's what the pshat was, is that he withheld these women from their husbands just inadvertently. Okay,
Also,
that
they
was
would
number one.
talk
Number two,
with them.
3 lines into the wide lines.
Can you hear me?
This person, Yisachar Ishkafri Barkoi, Shemechabed is Atzmo Mechalo Kodshe Shemaim. He would honor himself and he would defame the Kodshe Shemaim. To have a Karich Yode B'Shirai, the Avid Avad, he would put like a glove on. Shirai is silk. He would like wrap his hand in a way where his hands wouldn't get dirty from the korbanos. You are in the wrong profession if you are concerned about your hands getting dirty when you are a Kohen in the Mikdash. As we know, of course, the blood was knee high. It's not, I can speak as a profession with a blade. You got to be willing. It's just part of the job. It comes with the territory. You're going to put on a glove, dafka. So the Rishonim asked, there's a lot of shilas about this. Was it a chatzitza as it relates to the korbanos by the kachim? I got an email like this. Someone emailed me through my website. A chutzpah, don't call yourself a mol. You have a chatzitza. You write that you wear sterile gloves. There's no din of chatzitza by bris milah, but these are shilas that come up in the poskim. So anyways, that's what he did here. He covered his hand. Another scream. This was a good one. There was a scream in the Azar. Talmido shel Pinchas. This person, Yishmael ben Pachi, the same one we saw in the last of the short lines, whose children were not so geshmak and who misbehaved and they were beating people up. But here, this person himself, inherently on his own, he was a Talmud shel Pinchas, Pinchas HaKohen. Pinchas ben Elazar, Sheheshivas Chamosim al Bnei Yisrael B'Kunos Eskinasi B'Socham, Parshas Pinchas, the very same. So his Talmud was Yishmael ben Piachi, and he should be there. Yishamesh B'Kuna Gedola. Ve'od Tzavcha Azar Su Sha'im Roshechem Yikanis Yochanan ben Narbai Talmido Shel Pinkai. Yochanan ben Narbai did not stay from his whole life, unfortunately. When he was older, he went off the derech. So the Meforshim actually say Pinkai is actually Pinchas, but it's a shem mechuna. It's said in a way which was done a little bit of a, because we don't want it to be a gnai on Pinchas today. You don't want to blame the Rebbe. Not every time that a child goes off the derech is it the Rebbe's fault. So the Gemara just kind of changes his name according to some. And why was he such a geshmak? Because this guy could eat. This is what the Gemara says about him. 300 animals, which shows a gimel meos garbe yain, 300 satchels of wine. All of this was dessert. The afreser. This he could pack it down. Not once was there nosar in the times of Yochanan ben Narbai. An unbelievable feat. Unbelievable. So earlier we spoke about a person. The Gemara here is gonna pick up on this a little bit. My salka bay b'yisachar ish. It said kafri before, no? It said kfar barkai. So I thought before it said kafri. It does not. My salka bay. What happened to Yisachar ish kfar barkai? So it says the Gemara a story about him. Amrei Malka v'Malka sahabu Yasve. The king and queen, not Jewish, they were sitting and having a meal. This was in the times of Yerushalayim. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Malka Amra Gedia Yoi. The king said the Gedia is the best. Malka Sa Amra, the queen said Imra Yoi. No, the Imra is a better animal, much better animal. Amru Man Muchach. Who can be the one to answer such a question? Pasha, the Kohen Gadol. He's mamish the bucky and all the animals. He knows exactly what everything tastes like. And so he should be paskening. So Kohen Gadol, the Kamasi Korbanos Kol Yoma, that's what he does all day. He talks about Korbanos. We should ask him. So Asa Ihu, they went to go bring him. He's feeling all kinds of chashuv. He's expecting to get an appointment, something chashuv. He's expecting something amazing. And then they're like, hey, listen, which animal tastes better? And he was like a little deflated. So Achve Biyadi, he's like, seriously, that's what you brought me here for, to ask me which one? Igad Yai Yasik L'Tmida. If the Gedi was better, that's the one we would use for a tamid. So the king was very off-put by this is not right. This is not the way to behave. Omar Malka, the king said with a stern face, because you did not have the appropriate fear of the king, nifsakuli yamine, we're cutting off your right hand. So he did not play his cards, right? But look at the measure for measure here. The hand, which is his right hand, you can't be a Kohen lefty, right? The hand, which was his right hand, the hand that does the avodah, the hand on which he wore the silk glove to keep his hands clean, you're doing it wrong. Mida keneged, mida, the right hand is cut off. So Yav Shochad, he actually bribed the executioner to say, please, cut my left hand instead. Upaske my fine. So they cut off his left hand instead. But then the king's like, absolutely not. Shama Malka, upaske liyamine. Don't mess with the king. Then he heard that he bribed the executioner to only cut the left hand. He's like, sorry, no dice. And he cuts the right hand from the wrist as well. Amar Rav Yosef, a hashkafik line. It's sometimes a bitter pill to swallow, a hashkafa line that is relevant to this person, to this Kohen Gadol. Brich Rachmana, bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Da'ashkalei Yisachar Ish Kfar Bar Koi, who took from Yisachar Ish Kfar Bar Koi, Lemitrafse Minei B'hai Alma. The Mitrafse, Rashi says, Gemulo, he got his pay, he got his consequence in this world. Very, very difficult hashkafa idea, very lofty idea. There's no such thing as tzaddik v'ralo. Everything happens as kol da'avid rachman l'tavu da'avid. Many stories abound. Amar Ravashi, Yisachar ish kvar bar koi lo tana mas nisin. So this says the Gemara, I got you. I understand that it's good. He got his. What was he talking about? That if it tasted better, we would have used it for a tamid. What kind of answer was that he gave the king? It's not even accurate. It doesn't match the Mishnayos. Ditnan, what does the Mishnah write? Ditnan, Rav Shimon Omer, Kvasim Kodmen Le'izim B'chol Makom. Yes, the keves does become first, but Yachal Mibnei Shemuvcharin B'mina. The Mishnah writes, is it because it's a better taste? No. Talmud Omar, Im keves yavi korban omalamin sheshneim shkulim ke'echad. If you want to bring a keves, whatever, it's all good. They all taste exactly the same. So why are you misquoting a Mishnah? You're a Talmud Chacham. You're the Kohen Gadol. Why aren't you saying like the Mishnah says? So Ravina's like, forget the Mishnah. He's got mamash a pasuk in the Torah that he's ignoring. Ravina Amar afilu mikra nami lo kara. He's not even holding in chumash shnai mikra becha targum. Tichsiv im keves im eis. Either one. Ibai keves leisi. Ibai eis leisi. He could bring either one. So the whole story was Marav Siniger. His answer was probably tongue in cheek. It was probably the answer that Rabbi Yisachar gave the king was probably just meant to get out of the room. I thought you were bringing me for something chashuv. He ignored Mishnayos and Psukim. He was just giving an answer on his own, but it wasn't meant to be a halachic answer. Baruch Hashem, Hadron alach makom shenagu, and it also adds in here with Slika la Pesach Rishon. This is the first half of the Maseches. We will then continue with the second half. And this long collection on the bottom of Nun Zayin and Beis are debate about who wrote it, but it reviews in relative brief, the mitzvos of Korban Pesach. We should come back to this new parak of Tamid Nishchat in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Just to review our schedule, starting tomorrow night, this Monday night, tomorrow night, in 24 hours, we'll be doing Daf Yomi only via Zoom. We'll be doing approximately a blot and a quarter a night, which will help to kind of even things out over the course of the week. Everything through Zoom, and nothing on Shabbos. Of course, we'll do Motzei Shabbos at 8:40 p.m. so that those who want to join can. Everything will be posted to podcasts and to YouTube after shiur every night. Kol Tuv, have a beautiful night.